The legislative session continues in Tallahassee on this Tuesday morning, and there have been a lot of things to talk about when it comes to Florida politics. And so joining us live now via Zoom is Kimberly Leonard, who is a reporter with Politico and also the author of the Florida Playbook newsletter that you can get in your inbox every weekday. And Kimberly, we always like catching up with you here on our Playbook Tuesdays, so we appreciate you joining us this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to start here, if we can. A lot of talk about immigration actions when it comes to the Trump administration, but as you reported in Florida Playbook this morning, some of those actions are becoming ad fodder with some billboards popping up in South Florida. What's the situation?
Look, leading up to the 2024 election, Republicans felt like they had a lot to work with when it came to the Biden administration's actions on immigration. First of all, they thought they weren't tough enough. But second of all, they really thought that the Biden administration dropped the ball when it came to reaching a deal with Venezuela on their elections. And so all the weeks and weeks leading up to our election here in the US, they really used that against Democrats. They essentially called them socialist sympathizers, and they did so pretty effectively. I mean, Miami-Dade went very heavily Republican. It went to Trump. But now there's a different president in the White House. And so there are outside groups, there are Democrats that are using Trump's actions, his decisions to revoke TPS protections, which help people who are fleeing countries with persecution to be able to work in the United States. They tried to revoke those protections. They've been blocked by the courts, but obviously it's a long process to get things, appealed and so forth. The Democrats are really now flipping the script, turning things around to Republicans and saying, you're not doing anything. Why aren't you standing up to Trump? And they're really targeting, there's a bunch of billboards that went up here in Miami-Dade County where I live that are targeting our three, Miami lawmakers, House members to say, y'all need to speak out against this. You need to do more. And so it's trying to put pressure on those members who so effectively were able to talk about immigration before.
And what is the response from those lawmakers?
Not a whole lot, although Representative Salazar has been the most vocal, I would say, in terms of defending herself, defending her record. I mean, it makes sense. We have a very big immigrant community down here in Miami-Dade County. A lot of people, who have relatives that are afraid to have them go back to places like Venezuela where it's not safe. And so it could be something that is a liability, although, it's a lot of voters are still we're not comfortable with a lot of the policies that the Biden administration had before and might also remember that. So we do see Democrats beginning to sort of shape their messaging heading up to 2026. And it's a pretty big effort, especially with the House having such a narrow majority for Republicans.
And speaking of Democrats and messaging, let's talk at the state level here with the Florida Democrats vowing to push forward after an interesting couple of days when it came to leadership of specifically the Senate caucus.
Yeah, their big hold my beer moment to Republicans, right? I mean, Republicans have been fighting with the governor just for months now. Everything, all the anger toward him was sort of spilled out in the open. And then we now know that Democrats also do not like each other, that they didn't like their very Senate leader, the state Senate leader, Pizzo, who announced from the Senate floor that he was no longer going to be a Democrat. He declared the state party dead. He seemed very frustrated. He was someone that had been talked about as potentially running for governor. I don't know yet whether that's off the table or not. He could run as a no party affiliated or a third party candidate, which may end up handing the state to the Republican. But there is a lot of anger within the Democratic Party. A lot of it too has to do with how little investment they got from the national party. And there's just a sort of, I'm reporting more on it now, but there's a sort of feeling that there's a lack of direction, that the state party needs to understand to set very much more realistic goals, essentially, and not to make claims about trying to take back Florida, but maybe just to build the bench to have more sort of municipal level school board types elected to office before eventually, trying to really compete at the statewide level. So there's a lot of infighting, and I think we saw that spill through. And Pizzo was the third Democrat in the legislature to flip The two others went Republican, he went NPA, but still, I think it shows that there's a lot of unhappiness within the party that they have yet to sort out.
Yeah, still a lot of questions, and it was interesting to hear from the new Senate Democratic Caucus leader about some of her disagreements with Pizzo's take on where things stand and that kind of thing, and kind of where things go from here. So it's something to watch closely, I think, given the advantages that the Republicans already hold here.
Absolutely. And any infighting makes it a lot more difficult for Democrats to get the state back to, swing state status, which is really their goal. But if you don't get along, then that makes it a lot harder. Of course, we see Republicans are also not getting along, and yet they seem to be just continuing to grow their voter registration. So, maybe it's not the case.
Last thing I'll ask you here, because you mentioned the Republican infighting. It has added up to some interesting kind of closing days here in the legislative session as well, where there's still a lot of questions when it comes to the budget, no action on property insurance, as I know you talked about in Florida Playbook. So some interesting things happening in Tallahassee.
Yeah, and just new today, actually, from the House floor, the speaker announced that they would be creating a commission essentially to look at what to do with property taxes. He put out a bunch of different proposals. He said, let's look at increasing the homestead exemption. Let's look at properties only getting appraised every few years. He basically had like a laundry list of things to look at. And from the governor's allies and comments on social media, they were not happy about this. This was a huge priority for the governor. He wants to see, he said he wants to see property taxes abolished altogether. I do get the sense that he would accept any kind of a win that reduces property taxes. But this is, it represents a little bit of a give by Perez to say, by the House Speaker, to say, let's try to meet you halfway, but still not something the governor is happy to accept, it seems like to me, from what I've seen so far.
All right, more interesting things to watch going forward. No shortage of that, it seems like these days. Kimberly Leonard, Politico reporter and Florida Playbook author. We always appreciate you joining us, and good talking to you today here on Florida Live.
You too. Thanks so much.